Okay, well, great. We're going to go ahead and get started then. I'm very excited about this. This really started, now I think was 3 years ago with our partnership with FEMA and Resilience Action Partners. And we are just going more deeply into this partnership this year and really continuing to see the opportunities and ways to support artists in many neighborhoods when it comes to supporting projects that relate to flood mitigation. This program, as Margaret said, was really the brainchild of FEMA Region 8, and I'm gonna kick it over to Margaret to share a little more deeply about its origin story for those of you who are learning about this program for the first time.
Thanks, Louise. So yeah, a few years ago, we spend a lot of time at FEMA trying to raise awareness about natural hazard risks in our communities and to get a new audience of families and community members embracing an understanding of their risks and also how those risks can be lessened through mitigation efforts. So, we spend a lot of time putting together a bunch of really great scientific data and handouts and fact sheets and those sorts of things. And I proposed a few years ago that what if we engaged with the arts and cultural communities in our region, and our region, by the way, is Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, the Dakotas, and Montana. And I said, if we just worked with them to find new ways to communicate how mitigating these natural hazard risks can be a part of people's regular lives. And so we did this project, which we'll tell you about. That was our pilot. And we're so excited now to be coming back to Denver in these communities, these 3 neighborhoods where they're just such cool neighborhoods with exciting stuff going on and a lot of diversity and vibrancy and really deep community roots. And they also happen, from our perspective, to have a history of flooding and a high flood risk for the Denver metro area. And also, unfortunately, a situation where not a lot of the folks that are living in high risk areas have purchased flood insurance. We know this because this is what we do for a living. And there's lots of really good reasons for that. And we know that, but we just want to, start a communication with these communities about how they could potentially mitigate their risks through a lot of different ways. So we know for sure that the art community is going to be better at reaching them than we are. So we're just so excited to have you all potentially going on this journey with us. I think I'll drop off from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Margaret. Similarly, we are so thrilled because, I think in the arts community, as many of you know, we see a lot of cross-sector thought and ideas in the arts and how arts really can move people emotionally versus necessarily data-driven explanations. We've seen art really create change because it really is able to speak the data still, but in a more relevant way to communities. So we, though, at the same time had no idea that flood insurance would have been helpful in any of these areas. So we're very excited to have FEMA on board to kind of speak from that space, and we can help with the translation to how this is going to work through an artist practice and process. So we're thrilled with the partnership. So just high level, we have put out the artwork's call details. It's $45,000 in project support to support your team and your artist's costs, including labor, materials, shipping, etc. It is an all-inclusive amount. Of course, it is for art concept focused on flood and risk mitigation. which Maddie's going to go further into that later on in this presentation. I wanted to kind of call out this word mobile. I think I just want to be clear for the artists on the call who are interested in this project that this does not mean it has to be on wheels. I know that sometimes when we say mobile art experiences, you can't help but think of a cart. But really, you know, the idea is not to limit your ideas, but rather to duplicate this in 3 of these neighborhoods, Rosedale, Ruby Hill, and Overland Park. And I'll kick it over to Maddie to share why these neighborhoods and yeah, and their relationship to the risk mitigation and flooding.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, as Margaret mentioned, we did some kind of analysis at FEMA and looked at all of the neighborhoods in Denver. And here at FEMA, we have a lot of different data sets. So we looked at where the flood risk was occurring first. And we looked at, you know, where were there these areas where there's higher flood risk? Maybe historical floods have happened. You know, we know that there have been some pretty destructive floods along the Cherry Creek and the Platte in Denver. And then looking at some of the neighborhoods where there was, as Margaret mentioned, lower insurance coverage. Later in the presentation, I'll give a little bit more information about how at FEMA we talk about mitigating floods, but through insurance is one of the biggest ways that we encourage property owners to protect, you know, their assets, their property. And we found that individuals who have insurance are, you know, more likely to recover at a faster and kind of more resilient rate after a flood damaging event. So, you know, we saw these neighborhoods, we saw that they are higher risk to flooding. They've had flood events, but for some reason, our communication and our messaging isn't fully permeating these communities. And, you know, there's lower rates of insurance coverage. And, you know, we like to encourage mitigation through other channels, but this kind of was just a way for us to identify areas where we thought that, you know, we needed to do some additional outreach. And so using art in these communities as a way to reach the community members about their risk. And then also, you know, we want to make sure that we're capturing the culture of these communities, the different kind of populations that are being represented, and have an art that speaks to them on a more relevant way. So it's kind of how we chose Rosedale, Ruby Hill, and Overland Park. We'd like the art to be accessible. So that's kind of why we brought in this mobile element. So we are meeting the people where they are. So, you know, those who may not be able to travel to other locations. So we're trying to bring the art to them at publicly accessible community events. So, you know, this, we're looking at the summer 2023 kind of fall timeframe. So we're thinking events such as, you know, farmers markets or concerts or any sort of kind of outdoor publicly accessible gathering, so that we can bring the art again to these communities and meet the different neighborhood populations. And then, yeah, and we want this to be reflective of their vibrant culture and helping to kind of drive our message home.
You know, also on the, you know, as it says, the who is you guys, the artists, if you operate as a collective, and also if you want to bring others within, you know, your collaboration work. You know, obviously, I think all of us know, you know, to do these type of site-specific and community-responsive works, it sometimes takes collaboration, which is totally encouraged. You know, you could even, and this is not to say you should, but, you know, think expansively about your collaborations and how content could be activated differently in relationship to flood mitigation. It's just to say that the artists don't have to be an expert on all of this. You know, not only do we have FEMA as a partner at the table who can provide so much expertise around flood mitigation, but we're looking to you to lead the visual experience, whether that's through projection, performance, installation, works of theater. There's really, really the idea is not to limit the what or the who in this approach, but really just to make it available in these 3 locations. And of course, if it's, new media or things like that, we can adjust the time of day of the community events as needed to best support the medium of your choice. Okay. So, the overall program goals, as you have heard us already, is to, again, how can the artwork lead to a greater connection, understanding on an emotional level for the story of risk mitigation? This program has been my first, opportunity to see that emotional connection beyond like what we experience in terms of disasters. So like, I feel like this is a nice preventative step, so that how we can prepare for flood mitigation can be through the arts and through an understanding that it can express on a sensory, interactive and experiential levels that you guys, I know, have all done. And I'm gonna kick it back to Maddie for types of flood mitigation.
All right, I think so this slide here is just, again, kind of reiterating the power of art, the emotive qualities of art and the way that art can speak to us on all of these different levels. And I mean, this is just reiterating for what we all here kind of share and feel, but just recognizing that art is memorable, it's emotional, and it speaks to us more than just numbers and graphs and maps, which is usually kind of what we've been doing in FEMA in the past. And then on the next slide, we'll go into flood mitigation examples. So, you guys are the art experts. We're still learning a lot about this process on the FEMA side of things. We don't know all of the details and the expertise behind what goes into, putting together a large scale art installation like this, but we do know flood mitigation really well. And so we're here, as Luis mentioned, to kind of be your support system on what is flood mitigation, what does that look like? And so this slide here has some examples. As I mentioned, we do encourage insurance, but there are a lot of ways that individual property owners and then also the community, the community officials as a whole can reduce the risk to flooding. We have various kind of structural mitigation project ideas that we encourage, such as elevating your homes. So that could, a message about elevating a structure could be somehow tied into the art project, elevating certain elements of your house. So, various electrical systems, or if you have a HVAC system, putting that elevated can also mitigate and also help prevent against damage to your property. Installing floodgates or flood vents, different things that can be done to your house. So that's kind of maybe one way we could take the art. Also talking about encouraging different flood resistant building materials. So there are certain decisions that can be made in the construction of the home. So again, I'm just throwing out, brainstorming, like if you want to use these certain materials in your art project and talk about how some are more or less resistant, that could be a way to take this. And then we also do a lot of work at FEMA with encouraging our natural green spaces and kind of these sort of natural mitigation barriers or ways that we can work with the earth and work with the natural and the built environment to mitigate flood risk. So again, this is kind of just a list that we put together. There are many other mitigation examples, but this might just help you all as artists and us recognizing that you are not flood mitigation experts as we are. These are just some ideas for you to get the wheels moving.
And oh, go ahead, Maddie, sorry.
Oh no, you go on.
though there are, I think, many examples across the globe about how artists are working within the environment, which many of you on this call are very aware of, we are really wanting this work, of course, to connect with these neighborhoods specifically and reflect a local character, as Maddie said earlier, including the different demographics, ages, and languages that are maybe represented in the neighborhood. Now, again, coming from Redline and knowing that, a work cannot do all things for all people. So please lean on our project team, whether it's myself or Laura's, and if you have more questions for FEMA, we're happy to kind of get that information as your project is developed and considered in relationship to kind of the goals of these projects. Of course, we did want to share the example that was the project fund recipient from last year. It was a collaboration with Matt Barton, who has been an artist and also avid skateboarder, to create Community Forums, which is at the Taxi Complex in the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea neighborhood. Matt created a site-specific sculpture within the Taxi Complex that really worked on guiding natural water flows based on a kind of a flooding issue that complex was having. So, again, I learned what bioswales were last year for the first time. But again, are these vegetated ditches that aid in the collection and conveyance and filtration of stormwater, which Matt's sculpture did beautifully in this very sculptural curvilinear way. I did want to share that, this work continues to work, which makes it a great poster child for the Artworks program, and that there's a skate day today starting at 5 o'clock. So if you actually wanted to see kind of one of these projects being activated by community this evening, there's going to be food truck and Epic Brewing Company, and it's going to be a skate day that is sponsored by are supported by Black Cube, as well as I believe 303 boards. So yeah, it's and there is information alongside the artwork, of course, about the FEMA collaboration, about flood mitigation. So if you wanted to, kind of go on an errand to kind of learn about a living, breathing example of this project and how it was done successfully, that is happening this evening. So it'd be fun. I'm going to definitely drop by. So hope to see you guys there. Okay. So entry requirements, Maddie and I talk about, this is a list of things that we also have on the call. But, one of the things that we were just going to kind of point out, and maybe Maddie, you can speak a little bit to what FEMA means in terms of political messages, copyright material, or brands. And maybe I can talk about the number 7 in terms of what we mean by community involvement.
Yeah, maybe also it looks like I'm just kind of looking in the chat too. We've had a few questions about number 1, preferring artists that live, work, or have a connection to Overland Park, Rosedale, and Ruby Hill. I don't know if Luis, if you can speak out, and I'm sure we'll answer in the chat, but if you can speak a little bit to the requirement about, or, preferring artists who live in those neighborhoods.
Yes, and I do apologize. I have not been following the chat. So if you haven't had your question answered yet, we will definitely do it at the end, and Laura's will kick it up to us. But to the question in terms of, do you have to live there? Okay, yes. Yeah, I would say that you have to have a meaningful connection, and that can come through not necessarily your residence in these neighborhoods, but it could come through maybe because you have community relationships through your creative practice, or you are very familiar with these neighborhoods and you know some of the anchor community members. You know, I think as residents and artists living in Denver, I think we all know it, we're very close. You know, so really just showing kind of a thoughtful and intentional approach in your proposal, I think is kind of most important, that you are sensitive to who's there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're parachuting in with something that really is a disconnect from what the local communities would respond to. And again, knowing many of you on the call, I think this is already part of your practice and approach, but I hope that clarifies a little. I think that was, yeah, the farm to spaceship question, which that's great.
Yeah, and then also like to add on too, you know, connections, they can be made through partnerships throughout the process of creating this art. So, you know, we are encouraging, you know, just kind of making this immersive with the community. And so as partnerships and relationships form during, you know, that art making process, community connections forming, you know, we're just encouraging that, yeah, we're just getting as much engagement earlier on. And as I said, in the process, rather than just this final kind of like art piece that we're just showcasing at the end.
Yeah, and also, you know, I do think that you can, through the process and development of your projects, similar to what Black Cube did with community forums, they did not have a enormously established relationship with Taxi. It was a connection that added to a connection that added to a connection. And then now, you know, a year in, they have a ongoing relationship with Taxi and Globeville Elyria Swansea. So yes, to your question, no, it's not that you have to have, and it will not be held against you if you don't have the, you know, if you don't live in the neighborhood or have these really deep partnerships from the jump. But the idea is that it is part of your approach that you are going to be, you know, connecting with community and thinking of community as you develop and evolve your project for artworks. I hope that helped a little. But yeah, Margaret or Anna, or if there's anyone else who wants to share a little bit more about that, happy to give you the floor.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is when we went out and talked to these communities and the neighborhood representatives and city council and people that they recommended that we go speak to, we heard repeatedly, you should try to meet these communities and these families and the people living here where they already are, rather than asking them to go somewhere to see something. And so that's why it really comes from them, that they have a lot of events that they're trying to promote and build up and create some energy around. And if we can help them do that, then that's where we should be, rather than asking them to pick up and go to something that we've come up with.
And, you know, as Redline, we're also very happy to help you build those connections based on your idea, you know, and, you know, looking at the events calendars that we were pointed to in the community meeting to help you maybe kind of assess to see if there is a natural amplification of what is already existing that could be the right context or setting for your project. So I think there's a lot of different approaches, and we are just here to help you with those approaches.
And then to speak to, let me just go back really quick. I just want to touch on some of the other things.
Yeah.
So then just real quick, to speak to some of the other entry requirements. So, you know, we at FEMA are requiring that the art does not include political messages, copyrighted materials, or brands. You know, we understand that things can get controversial and very kind of polarized politically pretty quickly in today's environment. And so really wanting this art project to be as accessible to a broader audience. And so keeping it, you know, no strong really any political messages or any kind of polarization there. Please do not include any brands or copyright materials. We have, to go through a lot with our external affairs folks, and just representing federal agency, we do have some requirements. So again, please do not include any of those. And we're encouraging a positive tone. I think that a lot of times at FEMA, there's kind of different ways to communicate hazard risk. And oftentimes we get lean towards, either scaring people or a negative tone. So we're really trying to keep this more positive, and kind of, as we've mentioned, connected specifically to these three different communities. And then also on number 8, if, once we get this going and we start looking at different events where this mobile experience immersive art could be showcased, FEMA needs to approve the events in advance. So, just working closely with myself and Margaret to make sure that any sort of event where we want to showcase the art is on FEMA's radar.
And, just a point of clarity in terms of communication, FEMA is, which you wouldn't think, but you guys are very accessible, which thanks for that. So that being said, for the artists, just know that Redline is your first point of contact. You will ultimately, I'm sure, just because of the wonderful personalities with Margaret and Maddie on the call, be connected to the FEMA people going on with your project. But just to help streamline communications, we're happy to be your first go-to, and then we can help kind of navigate you to the right resource within the partnership, depending upon what you're trying to achieve. Okay, and then Maddie, to put you on the spot again.
Yeah, no, so our support for you all is kind of included on this slide. So starting off, we have a great access to different kind of documentation support. So we can help with either, videography, photography, and ways that we can capture the ways that the art is being engaged with at these different events. So we will be able to provide help with that. We're also able to help with, as I've mentioned, information about flood mitigation, flood risk, natural hazards, any questions that you have about the science, our processes, our programs. We have a lot of, as we've mentioned, resources that we've already created, handouts, different kind of infographics. I mean, none of this I would really consider art, but we have different kind of things that we can provide you with and help with the kind of the flood side of things. We're also here to help with outreach and engagement to the communities. We do a lot of that at FEMA. We have a lot of different kind of community stakeholders and points of contact. So we're definitely able to help get you in touch with the different neighborhood associations, promoting the art, promoting our partnership with you and with Redline, and to kind of help get the word out about this work that we're doing. And then of course we cover the entry fee as well.
And Sarah, I like your question. And yes, the idea though is that the budget isn't ×3. So it would be working within the same budget to do that more specific, pointed, neighborhood oriented work, but that absolutely could be your approach, and there a more intentional nuance between how the project shows up in each of the neighborhoods versus one that necessarily works for every single neighborhood, which is, again, as we're saying, we really are trying to be thoughtful to the who and how we meet folks where they are versus necessarily saying that, what works for Ruby Hill also works for the other two, so yes, yes, and yes. Okay, so our application checklist, easy. You guys know this so well. We also have a budget template that you can download. Again, the cycle is supposed to be completing, you know, as in summer of next year. So you have from when obviously the project begins, which is as soon as the grant is awarded, until the anniversary of that date. Include your collaborator information, project description, desired medium, which again, you can be very expansive in your medium, description of how the art will be presented at community events. And again, totally encourage you to look at other community calendars, what's going on, or like Community Forums did, develop your own. Also, Redline's happy to help chat with you about, you know, what might be the best strategy for the work that you're presenting. Work samples, obviously, because it is a new project, you know, if you have maquettes or sketches, design files, fantastic, but also include some previous work that you've done, you know, that maybe gives the selection committee a sense of your practice and community engagement style. That is always helpful. Project references, you know, if, you know, this is just like a listing of references. It's not like you're asking for recommendation letters or anything like that. But if you want to include people that just can speak to your work and your practice, and then of course your artist statement. Okay. And then here are some of the review metrics, which I know we had a question in the chat about how the selection committee is going to look at each application and through what lens. So, and I know we've spoke about this a lot, but there should be a clear plan for how the process or outcome will involve the community, invite them to add to the art concept or participate in the art concept. It be interactive. You know, obviously, Community Forums is a good example of that. People are literally skating on the sculpture while also learning about flood mitigation, which we never thought was possible. Climate change, art should carry the message that climate change will likely make flooding events more costly, but you can protect your family and investment. So, you know, there is this element to it. And then of course, equity. The increase in severity of disasters disproportionately affect historically under-resourced communities that art should include the cultural perspective of those populations that live and work in the identified neighborhoods. So, you know, as with everything Redline does, and as FEMA is also underscoring here, it's through a lens of equity. And then this is just, I think Tony's even on the call. We should just have him say his own quote, but hopefully we can show this off as a model, and other communities would be interested in replicating the idea of multiple use facility and not just having slabs of concrete, which I agree, concur with Tony's quote there. And, you know, this is something that we really do hope will continue to be project funding for artists who are working in these spaces, which we know absolutely exists. We had a great response from last year's call and are looking forward to that to this year's call. Obviously, the link here is more about the program, and then you can apply through Submittable. So if you go to the artist grants link on Redline's website, this will land you to this first link, and then you can also, that will link to the Submittable page. Again, to apply for project support through Submittable, you just have, you have to sign up for a free login, and then you're good to go. Okay, so now is my more favorite part, which is when I stop talking and just kind of give the floor to you guys. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question so we can give Lara, as our chat master, a break. Or there may not be questions. Anyone have any questions? Or terrified of unmuting? Okay.
I just wanted to say, to address Sarah's comment, question about doing 3 separate projects. And one of our tenets in this from the Artworks team is to not get in the way of the art and to not be too prescribed. So we want to see what everybody has in mind. We know you'll come up with better ideas than what we could have come up with. So propose it, I guess. I don't know, from we were looking for something that could go to multiple events, and maybe potentially, maybe it would go to more events after this is happening. So that's why we were thinking of it as mobile, but we don't want our idea to get in the way of a good idea. So we'll just stay open. I hope that makes sense.
I did actually have a quick question. So I love that skate park image. I would love to learn more about that project. If we wanted to think about something like a permanent installation somewhere, is that something that you all could help us sort of coordinate and have conversations about with people? Or should we have something in mind for the application itself?
I mean, I do think that it would be just kind of checking in with yourself, because doing a site specific installation that would be more permanent would be, of course, much more work in 3 different neighborhoods. But I would be the last person that would ever say no to a big idea. I think everybody on the call knows that. So I just, I want to encourage big thinking we certainly, could support artists in that thinking. I would just always be protective of the capacity that you have and the budget that is allocated for this project in order to be able to do that successfully. But, of course, like the idea of having something that has an ongoing community benefit is enormous. And I think FEMA and Redline both would feel like that would be very valuable. That may be the only time I speak on behalf of FEMA, but I feel like that would be, I feel like Margaret would be okay with that sentiment. So unless there are anyone on the team that disagrees, I would of course encourage, encourage the big ideas, and then we could chat about it, and maybe chat about it before you submit your application, just so that we can kind of do an environmental scan in terms of the feasibility of it based on access to locations, etc. Can we chat before submitting the app to explore the, yes, Deborah, of course. Yeah. And Laras and I are a 2-headed information team. So if one of us is not available, the other one can help. But Laras is the first point of contact at Redline. But again, we are both helping each other in this larger team. So. Okay, well, if there are not any other questions, Laras did put her email in the chat. We, of course, have recorded this. Thank you, Laras, yet again. And so we'll post this on the website. We are also going to develop an FAQ that will be posted on the website. And when is our application deadline again? I don't have that in my head ready. How far are we? No?
I think so. 29th.
29th. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. You're hired. Okay, so we look forward to connecting with you guys prior to the deadline. And of course, let us know if you have any questions. And thank you for joining us on this day after the holiday. It's nice to see you all.
You too.
Okay, team. Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.